we haven't talked to you for a few weeks, I almost don't know where to start. We've kind of been saving Warrior stuff till you come back, but I almost don't know where to start. I'll let you start.
Let's start with Draymond.
Okay.
To me, Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler's futures, in my opinion, seem very secure with the Warriors. And while Draymond Green, I would very heavily predict he remains here past the trade deadline. To me, considering the trades that could or couldn't be made and some of the building blocks needed and his play recently compared to the other two, mega stars on the team, is a little bit more in question. And then obviously you mix in, some of the ejections, the storming off the bench, the stuff with Steve Kerr, which I know you talked about with McMahon and Bontemps. He has had a little bit of a roller coaster that I think has settled a bit, partly because typically with Draymond, it's a little bit of like a boiling over, an explosion, and then a resettling. And I think that they've said it. They said it last night. His focus level has been really good in the last week or so, and his, dealings with teammates and coaches and all that has gotten into a good place. I thought it was interesting last night. There was a lot of talk yesterday because Steve Kerr had gotten ejected, right? We talked about in the Clippers game, and said that his mother was very upset with him. So Nick Friedel asked a question to Draymond about, what's his mother been mad at him? And Draymond just whips his phone out and starts reading recent text messages by his mom, who is a legendary figure back to the dynasty days, just killing him for getting ejected and his recent play and all that. And said that one of the texts was, "We need to have a heart to heart." And he's like, I left that on red. I haven't replied to that because he wanted to stack up a few games, before, having this heart to heart, and to the point of like, he is trying right now to, it seems like, get his season back on track, but also that resecures his place within this Warrior situation as franchise wide, they decide, front office ownership, which direction they're going in the next month. We all know it's such a big month for everybody across the league to assess their situations, but obviously the Warriors are prime among that.
I think it's been interesting in addition to the Draymond stuff that's been happening, chapters 804 and 805 in the Draymond annals. The Kerr has been like sort of, and I know that he's always, pretty honest as you're going to see in a head coach. He's been like very, very blunt.
He's been on edge. I was going to say, it seems like, Wendy, more on edge than usual, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's on the last year of his deal. He publicly announced prior to the season that we'll see afterwards. There's a freedom to the way he's operating. There's a finality in the way he's talking in a lot of ways. And I think this is him making sure he's painting the story how he believes it should be painted on his way out the door. And I'm not saying he's out the door for sure after this year. I think if they storm up to the, whatever seed and have a decent playoff run, I think it's very possible he's back. But he's very clearly and transparently, as he continues to do, laid out the idea that maybe it's it. And if it is it, you don't have to wait for the documentary to hear his honest thoughts on how this is all going down, because he is going to tell you into a microphone how it's going down.
Well, I just like, he was like, we're a fading dynasty, which is, it's true. Like, I'm a, middle-aged guy in my 40s. Like, it's like, it's true. It hurts to say, but I got gray hair coming in, it's true. They are a fading dynasty. And then like, I think it was the other day, I think you wrote about it. I think you tweeted about it. Where, Draymond was talking about how Steve met with him and was like, "Hey, we can't play the way we played a couple years ago. Like, the league has changed. Like, you play this way, like, we're going to lose." Yeah,
that was last night when I was talking about this increased focus level. I think there's been a lot of, attention about Draymond's ejections or the storming off the bench. Obviously, that's the stuff that interests fans, but really internally, they've just been saying, stop turning it over. Like, he's been turning it over like crazy. And they apparently had this meeting where Steve, as you said, he laid it out and said, we're not as good as we used to. So these turnovers, can't be as common. Number one, less margin for error. But two, what I thought was interesting, he said the league is different and these young up-tempo teams feast off those live ball turnovers. And it has killed them in a bunch of games. I can remember the game in Portland, Steph Curry.
Again, Chris Haynes reporting yesterday that the Mavericks do intend to trade Anthony Davis by the deadline. I start with you, Boogie. Is there a fit? Is there somewhere you'd like to see him go that would be best?
I think it's a few spots that could use, Anthony Davis. I feel like every team in the East should be, blowing up the Mavericks to try to make this move happen. Because any team in the East, if you're able to acquire a talent like Anthony Davis, I think it takes your team to that next level, and it also gives you a chance to actually compete in the East. So I would say every team in the East should be on that phone line, but. I would love to see AD in a Warriors type situation.
Okay.
I think AD going to the Warriors along with the talent of Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green. I think that's a group that could make some noise. And obviously, it's not as much pressure on AD defensively because you have a Draymond Green beside you. You also have a Jimmy Butler. So,
what are you giving up though if you're bringing?
Well, there's a guy that's not playing right now.
Well, but okay.
I mean, obviously you can start with Kuminga.
That goes into the next thing. Yeah. There are also reports saying that the Warriors may not actually move Kuminga. So all of this conversation.
Well, that would be
together.
foolish.
It's been foolish, but that doesn't change anything. If you get AD to the Warriors, do you love that?
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Anthony Davis, when he's healthy, he's on the floor. He is elite, big, and he's. I think all 29 other teams would love to have him. Now, talking to some people yesterday, I don't think there's a deal that makes sense right now for him, and the Mavs aren't just going to dump him. At the end of the day, he is Anthony Davis. Reports to Atlanta now that they've moved on from Trae Young. That could be a potential spot, but the Mavs are going to expect something, pretty big for a guy like Anthony Davis.
Well, they're very sensitive right now.
Exactly, and so they're going to go and make an outrageous move again. So I think he stays in Dallas.
You sure about that?
I mean, I hope. You got to hope that that's the case. There are a lot of teams out there. This part of the year gets kind of interesting, Isaiah, and I do get sort of in the weeds about it. But for you, I mean, we're hearing Golden State up here from these guys, reports of all kinds of Atlanta teams for AD. Do you have a preference, where you'd like to see him end up?
I think there are, 4 teams in the East that if they make a trade for AD, I think they become the favorite. And one of them I'm going to throw out here is, probably not being talked about as much. But if Boston makes a trade for AD, the way Boston is playing right now, and Jaylen Brown, and, they're second in the East. I mean, Boston right now has a chance to elevate to that, championship level again if they were to pull off a trade. I look at Atlanta. If Atlanta was to get AD, they would also be a team. And then there's Detroit, New York. I mean, either one of those teams, I don't know if Detroit wants to mess around with their 2 bigs because their 2 bigs are exceptional right now. But, if New York pulls a trade for AD, I mean, he swings the balance very similar to when Rasheed Wallace was traded from Atlanta several years ago. And he came to Detroit, and all of a sudden, Detroit takes off. I thought Rasheed, wherever he went in the East at that point in time, that team was going to elevate to the championship level. And I think that's the same with Davis. Any team that he comes to in the East right now, I think he puts them in a position to win the championship. I'm not so sure about the West. I think there's a heavier road to climb in the West, only because you got the Joker over there, and you still got OKC as a juggernaut. But in the East, he's a difference maker.
I got to get your take on this Kuminga thing, because you've seen this league from all angles. When you watch this, the fact that for now a few seasons we've been talking about how he doesn't get to play and there's some sort of an issue there between perhaps he and Steve Kerr. What do you make of that?
Well, clearly there's an issue between him and Steve Kerr.
Rough.
Because from a playing standpoint, it's kind of universally accepted that he can play. Now, here's what we don't know, right? We don't know if he can play because Steve Kerr hasn't really played him in years. And, very rarely does a player sit on a team's bench for years and don't get a chance to play, even when there's a coach-player, conflict, right? They're either moving that player on or something happens. But in this Kuminga situation, this has been the most serious situation that I've seen in a very long time, if ever, where we have a player that the NBA, generally agrees is an above-average player, but he doesn't play,
for no reason.
I don't mean
think about it.
You're right.
But we talk about for years, right? And then they give him, money on top of it.
If you really want to understand what the Golden State Warriors are doing right now, you have to stop looking only for blockbuster names and start paying attention to moves that win championships on the margins. This is exactly where Keon Ellis enters the conversation, and Warriors fans need to wake up to why this matters more than it might seem at first glance. Keon Ellis is not a flashy headline. He's not a superstar. He's not going to dominate the ball or show up on nightly highlight reels, but what he represents is something this Warriors team desperately needs as it tries to maximize the remaining prime years of Stephen Curry: perimeter defense, toughness, versatility, and a role player who understands his job and embraces it. Golden State has spent much of this season searching for defensive consistency on the wing and at the guard spot. The offense will always generate looks with Steph on the floor, but the problem has been stopping penetration, chasing shooters, and maintaining defensive intensity across 4 quarters. That's where Ellis fits this team like a glove. Ellis has built his reputation as a hard-nosed perimeter defender, someone who competes every possession and takes pride in making life difficult for opposing guards. Even in a season where his three-point shooting has dipped to around 35%, his value hasn't disappeared. In fact, that slight offensive regression is exactly what makes him attainable. Teams don't give away elite two-way players cheaply, but defensive specialists with modest contracts often become available at the deadline, especially when their current team isn't fully committed to them long-term. And make no mistake, Sacramento's usage of Ellis tells a story. His minutes fluctuate wildly. One night he's playing 30 minutes, locking down ball handlers. The next night he's barely seeing the floor. That's not because his defense vanished overnight. That's because the Kings are in a different phase, balancing young players, contracts, and future flexibility. With Ellis approaching free agency, Sacramento has to decide whether to commit or cash in. That's the opening Golden State should be monitoring closely. For the Warriors, this isn't about asking Ellis to be something he's not. This is about putting him in a defined role, surrounded by veterans, where his defensive intensity becomes an asset instead of an inconvenience. Steve Kerr's system has always thrived with players who move without the ball, defend with intelligence, and accept their responsibilities. Ellis checks those boxes. Think about the matchups. Against teams loaded with dynamic guards and wings, Golden State has often been forced to overextend Draymond Green or rely on rotations that leave shooters open. Adding a defender like Ellis gives Kerr another tool, another option to throw at elite scores, another body that doesn't need the ball to impact the game. That matters in playoff basketball, where every possession is magnified. Financially, this is also the type of move that makes sense for the Warriors. Ellis is on a manageable contract, doesn't cripple future flexibility, and doesn't require dismantling the core. Golden State isn't in a position to take on bad long-term money, and Ellis doesn't come with that risk. He's the kind of player you can evaluate in your system, see how he fits, and make a calculated decision on his future without panic. There's also a cultural element here that Warriors fans understand better than most. This franchise has built its identity on players who buy into something bigger than themselves. From Andre Iguodala to Gary Payton II, Golden State has a track record of elevating defensive-minded players who might not be fully appreciated elsewhere. Ellis fits that lineage perfectly. He's physical, disciplined, and willing to do the dirty work. And while his three-point shooting has dipped this season, context matters. Shooters go through stretches, systems matter, spacing matters. Playing alongside Stephen Curry creates cleaner looks than almost any environment in the NBA. The Warriors wouldn't need Ellis to be a 40% shooter. They'd need him to hit open shots, defend his position, and keep the ball moving. Everything else is a bonus. This is also about urgency. The Warriors don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect solutions. They need contributors now, players who can help stabilize rotations and bring energy every night. Keon Ellis represents a smart, calculated bet, not a reckless gamble. He addresses a need without compromising the future. If Sacramento decides that Ellis isn't a long-term priority, Golden State should be ready. Not loud, not desperate, just ready. These are the types of moves that don't dominate headlines but quietly shift playoff series. These are the moves that championship teams make when they understand that stars win games, but role players win series. Warriors fans should be encouraged by the idea that the front office is looking beyond names and focusing on fit. Keon Ellis wouldn't come in to change the identity of this team. He'd reinforce it. Defense, effort, accountability, and winning habits. That's Warriors basketball. So the question becomes simple. Do you want another season where Golden State struggles to contain elite guards, or do you want a player who takes pride in that challenge? Do you want depth that actually plays in the postseason, or depth that looks good on paper? Keon Ellis might be the loudest option, but he might be one of the smartest. Let me know what you think, Warriors fans. Would Keon Ellis be a smart pickup for Golden State? Is this the kind of under-the-radar move that helps this team make a real playoff push? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if you want more Warriors trade breakdowns, and subscribe to Warriors Nation News so you don't miss the next move.